Infertility Season 4. We have Jami Crist with us today, founder of the Radical Female Podcast and the lead author of The Losses We Keep. Jami's book shares personal stories from women who have endured pregnancy loss, IVF struggles, and the uncertainty of infertility. I resonate so much with Jami as she speaks on her path to motherhood through recurrent pregnancy loss. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Morning, good morning, or whenever you're listening to this, it might be evening, it might be a morning, but you're here, we're making it happen.
I love it. Absolutely. I love it. I feel like all three of us are like so far in our infertility journey. And you mentioned something in the book of just like it changes you and like your whole title of like the losses we keep. Like this is no matter where we're at in our motherhood journey, parenthood journey, like we keep every loss that comes along the way.
Every part of it. Yeah. It was interesting when I was creating the book, talking to my publisher, and we were talking about titles, and I was like, Jess, and she's so much better with words. That's why I hired a publisher, obviously. But I was just like, there's just something along this journey that every part of you that goes through it, it's a date, it's a memory, it's something that happened to you. Like it carries on forever. And obviously, when time heals at time, most of the time. And that was something that somebody told me when I lost my mother was like, helps heal the things. And it's like, yes and no, you're so far removed at that, it's not as bad, but you see like dates. Like I will never forget the first due date that we had. It's March 28th. This would have been the fifth year, thinking about us having a child then, but also like dates were literally everything within that journey. But then thinking about what you've gone through and things that happen to you, like it's also a little bit triggering at times. I even say like right now, everybody's like, aren't you so happy? You have your rainbow babies, you have two kids, they're healthy. And I'm like so blessed for that. And also so grateful for this experience of, because I think if I would have had our first baby the first go around, I was so deep in corporate world and so inundated. And I always share this story because I think it just shows the example of like how senile I was. But I was working on the run business category for Under Armour, and Olympics 2020 was coming up. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have this baby March 28th. I'm going to go back after maternity leave right before the Olympics. But then I'm going to go to the Olympics. I'm going to bring the baby with me, bring my mother-in-law with me, and we're going to go to Tokyo. And we're going to make this happen because I'm a woman. I could do it all.
I can do everything. Yeah.
I could do it all. And I think just the experience of losing our baby at 16, 17 weeks at that time just really stopped me in my tracks. And it's just sometimes when the universe just keeps like knocking you in your ass a couple of times and it's like, wait, sorry if I'm cussing, but wake the fuck up. I think that was like the moment that was just like, no, like something has to change here and something needs to pivot. And it took a few times to like figure out that pivot with purpose a little bit more, but I still think about how that really changed my life in a way, and it's also triggering in a way that even though we have healthy kids now, pregnancy after loss, having kids after loss, like it's still a very traumatizing thing what you went through, what you've been through, and also how that stays with you. And so when we talk about the losses we keep, it's beyond than just the dates and what's happened. It's also the journey that carries with you. And there's some good parts of it and not so great parts. And thank God for therapy to help you get through it. But, that's really how the title came about. And, I knew my story was just one. Our first loss was back in 2019. And back then, there wasn't really anybody talking about this yet. And I'm so amazed by this community that has totally unlocked in the last few years. But back then, it was barely anybody talking about it. So I was going through like who's been through something like this? Who's had a diagnosis like what we had with orthogyposis? Like I didn't even know what it was.
I
And
still
so
don't. Yeah, I was
yeah,
reading your story and I'm like, I still don't know what that is. So
yeah.
yeah, and that's how Amanda and I found each other. Because same with you. My first loss was early 2020. I know yours was the year prior, but I was like, who in my life has gone through that? And that's when I connected with Amanda. I was like, Amanda had chosen to share her loss publicly, and I was just like grasping for anybody that could like give
Right.
me their personal experience. And that's what I love so much about the book. And I definitely want to get into your personal story as much as you want to share, but It's so raw. Like the way that you told it was so great. Like you start off about going to therapy. And I think sometimes when you read these books about infertility and loss, it's not really like the woman's day-to-day life through that. And you shared so much of that was just like, I don't know. I just literally everything I read from you was
You
like,
know,
yes, I get it. Yes, I did that. Oh my gosh. It like brought me back to when I sat in that parking lot with the th like in a therapist's office. And then anyways, we'll get into all of it, but
yeah,
everything that you shared was so good. And you did it so well in like a summary format because I feel like
it
I
was
think I
so
even
hard,
it's
right?
so hard.
Because
You did
there's so much you
such
want to
a good
share and
job.
talk
Yeah.
about, but you also need to like just tell what happened, but also the lesson in the story, and that's like hire a publisher because Jess was such a great teacher. Like that was really the goal of it was like, let's make this into a writing cohort. So all of us who want to learn how to write better and tell our story better and get to the point, because I think sometimes we get so into the weeds that, we want to share. We want to share all the important details, but I think it's like just in the step of the process, how do we kind of get to what we want to share and so it can relate so quickly that we don't add so much fluff into the
That people
details.
kind of lose out interest. But
Yeah,
yeah, like, and I thought, like, I know we get like that on our podcast sometimes, like, my beta was this 17 years ago or what,
yeah,
whatever. But
yeah.
again, goes back to your story of the losses we keep. Like, we know those details and those are so impactful to us. But I just bravo on the book. Like, I thought I think I counted like your story was 22 pages or something like that. And I'm like, how did she do that so?
A lot of editing, a
Little baby.
lot. Like when she first said, I mean, the interesting part is like you have this mindset. You're like, I'm gonna be at the beach, waking up early, sipping my coffee, doing this beautiful writing experience. Oh
Yeah.
no. We just had Carter. My appendix erupted right before I had him. I was so depleted. It was like beginning winter. We kicked this off in March. I was like pumping at 4 a.m., barely sleeping. I was like,
What did
this
I
was
get
the big experience that I dreamed of. And then I wrote everything. And the same thing that you were talking about, like putting so much out there. And my publisher was like, okay, we need to like fix this up.
Yeah.
What are we trying to aim here? And literally the like week before we were like finally due for all of our chapters, I completely changed the whole thing. And I was like, Jess, I'm really sorry to do this, but I went for a run and it just all clicked of what I wanted to say and the theme of it. And completely rewrote the whole thing. So it's it's quite a journey to read a chapter. Like I can't imagine when people actually write a full book, uh,
Right.
because what I experienced, I was like, wow, this was quite eye-opening.
So for listeners that haven't read your book or aren't familiar with you, are you comfortable kind of starting from the beginning? And clearly you're good at summarizing. So tell as much or as little as you want, but just kind of your journey through. I mean, obviously all this happened to you before you wrote the book. So are you comfortable sharing your own journey through?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because when I look back when we first shared about our journey, the first pregnancy loss, people would ask like, because we announced our first pregnancy on social media, I even waited to like the 14th week mark because I was like, just to be sure, we had some weird things happen, but everything looked good. We were going back for a checkup at 16 weeks. So I'm like, all right, we're just gonna post. And so yeah, back in 2019, we found out we were pregnant in July and everything was going great. I was traveling still for work. And when I hit the 12-week mark, I went in for the ultrasound check and they saw something weird with the baby's abdomen. And they were like, just come back in a few weeks. I'm sure it's not much, but it's something with their abdomen. It doesn't seem serious. I think within 24 hours, they found a mass in my breast. And so we weren't sure at the time what was going on. It was just like back to back appointments. And so I immediately had to go for a biopsy for it. And luckily, it was just hormone growth. Sometimes when you get pregnant, the hormones can create a mass. So that's what it ended up being. And so we went back for our 16th week appointment. And the baby was not really moving. They kept sending me like to jump around, and we finally get on the table, and then the tech is showing us the baby's face, and then she gets quiet. And my husband's actually at this appointment with me, and she was like, "All right, I'm gonna just go get Dr. Atlas, and he's gonna come in and such." He comes in, he's checking everything out, and he's pretty quiet in this process. And he just clears me off and he's like, all right, we're just gonna go in this room down here. We're gonna talk. And when he left, I looked at my husband, Brad, and I was like, this doesn't, something doesn't feel right now. And so we go in this room, it's this tiny ass room, and the doctor and our genetic counselor, Amanda, came in and sat us down and just said, listen, we're seeing some major signals here that this baby has something called orthogyposis. It's basically the hands are curled in, the legs and the muscular structure is not fully built out. And either this baby's going to need a lot of surgeries, medical help, if you make it to full term, and or this baby's not going to make it. Um, and it just, when you hear this, you're just like, wait, what? Like, we just got our genetic testing back, nothing came back wrong. And it was the first time we met our genetic counselor. It was just kind of shocking in that sense. And it's so weird because Brad and I, for the longest time, we weren't sure if we wanted to have kids. We were both very career driven. I had a difficult upbringing with my family. Of my mom was an alcoholic, my aunt took legal custody of me, and I just wasn't sure if I wanted kids in this world because it was like what I went through as a child. And, you know, sitting in that room, it's something before then when we talked about was like, if something is seriously medical wrong, then we would, terminate for medical conditions. Like that's something we didn't even realize like what that even meant when we ever had this discussion. And so we talked about, and we're like, okay, like, I guess if this is the way it's at, like we're just going to have to see what our options are, and that's going to have to include terminating this pregnancy. And so when we brought that up, when the doctor and genetic counselor came back in, we didn't realize it either, is a Catholic hospital, and they're like, oh no, 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 you don't even have that option here. So we're
Oh,
like, oh shit. Like, and then I feel even more horrible because I'm like, oh God, like is he judging me for even bring that up? Is that like I don't even know what my options and what the hell's going on right now. So luckily, the Amanda, who was the genetic counselor, she worked at University of Maryland. They're a high risk pregnancy group, and she was like, "Listen, I work at University of Maryland. They're high risk pregnancy group. I would love to get you in there for a second opinion if that's the route you want to go." And literally the next day she got us in and we went in and the head doctor was like, guys, this is not good. And he even saw more issues with the muscular structure and the nervous system that he was just like, I highly recommend that you terminate because this is just not good at all. And for your health as well. At that point, and something else you don't really realize until you're in it, when you kind of get closer to that 20 week structure within your checkups and working with the hospital, termination for medical reasons gets harder because you have to go in front of a board to even get the approval of it. And so at that point, by the time we get the second opinion went in, they finally said, okay, this is okay to do. But if it was any farther, probably closer to 18, 19 weeks, and the board had it came in. So we went in for a DNC, and what I realized leading up to the week, like I felt pregnant, like afterwards, like I felt pregnant. The nurse said, you can go back to work whenever you want to. And I'm like, I don't even know how to tell people this just happened and to go back to work. And I was working at the time a very like forward facing job. I was doing events for Under Armour. We had a big event that week that I had to miss. I tell people like emergency came up and I can't come. And so at that point, I just posted on social, and we were so nervous because we've actually had parents tell us like, we don't know if you should post about you terminating this because what people may think. Even my half brother, who's much older than me, he had a daughter who was very handicapped, and because it was like early 90s, they still don't know what diagnosis she extremely had, but she ended up passing when she was about 14 because she suffocated because of her handicap. Like she just couldn't do anything for herself. And so even worried about what he would think in the situation and, just all of it. And so we posted out there of just like, this is what happened. If anybody's been through this, we would love to hear what you guys went through and, how to get through this. And so that really opened up my eyes of how many people have been through this because they would shoot me a DM, a text message. Hey, Jane, we went through something like this. We went through 8 weeks. We went through something like this at 12 weeks, whatever it may be. And I did not realize how many of our friends were affected to this. And just working through it. It took us another year to get pregnant again. And that was about end of July of 2020. And that pregnancy ended less than 8 weeks, miscarried at home, and then got pregnant again by January 20, what was that? I'm like thinking the dates, 2021. And once we hit about 13 weeks, we found out we had triploidy, where two sperm hit the same egg and it creates another whole set of chromosomes. So
Wow.
everything was looking great. We were on, on a good trajectory. And then we went in at that 13-week appointment. And then they realized something was wrong with the heart. And then come to find out, I was also taking progesterone at the time because it was lower. And, I was scheduled to go in for a D&C, and I actually miscarried at home, which that was one of the hardest things to go through within that situation. And then I got pregnant again in end of May of 21, and that ended up being a blighted ovum. And so we went in for our 7-week appointment at that point. And as you ladies probably know, it's like, what dates you can go in. You're rushing to get in because you're like, I know I got to go in at this point. The sooner, the better. So I just know what the hell is going on. And so we found out that it was most likely a blighted ovum, but then having to wait
Yeah.
because we didn't misoprostol to go through that. I went through 2 weeks of that and then through another D&C. And I just got to a point where I was like, this is 4 rounds of this. I don't understand. Like, I was an athlete, I was healthy. I just was wiped and just exhausted from it all.
Sure.
And I think as you go through it, right, you dig for all the research. You try to see, how did people get through something like this? How did they fix their bodies? Like, you're doing all the tests. And so luckily throughout that process, I had to dig a little bit deeper into my health and worked with a functional medicine doctor. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Cleopatra. Bless you. Um, she has a really great program and understanding test results from a functional medicine perspective, but also mindset. I mean, anything and everything. I was just like grabbing onto
Yeah.
it, trying to learn, as you guys know, and just told myself, like, give yourself the rest of the summer. We actually moved to the beach for 6 weeks that summer because Baltimore's kind of a smaller city, and I used to teach classes, and all of our friends were getting pregnant, moving forward, and I just felt like we were falling and failing behind them. And
I
like,
loved how you shared that because, like, without saying, like, this is my therapy, this is how I'm going to cope with some of this stuff and try to heal. Like, you share about therapists, but then you also share, like, this is just what I did. And like, I feel like it kind of worked, kind of didn't work. Like, things came up, right? Because you ended
yeah.
up getting pregnant, like, right before you went to the beach.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing was, which was interesting, I could get pregnant. It was just like not a healthy pregnancy. And so I got Brad tested, and he's like, why do I have to get tested? So then you got to deal with that from a male factor. And then I'm arguing with the doctors because after the fourth one, I'm like, don't you think we need to get him tested? Like,
Yeah.
something doesn't add up here. And then also, too, my acupuncturist, who was an angel, she's the one that really guided me for certain tests. So she was like, I think something's off with your thyroid. And come to find out, every time I got pregnant, my thyroid numbers would like triple. And so I would have to go on medicine. And so just figuring out in this process, it was just such a puzzle game. And it's frustrating in women's health because it's like, how do we not know these things as you're going, like, you can't get to the root of the problem, and especially going through IVF, I end up not going through IVF. We started the process and then I got pregnant again. And fortunately that was a healthy pregnancy with my daughter Adley. But what I think about is, like, how do we not get to the root of this problem? And just asking women to go rounds and rounds of IVF. We started the process with IVF, went through all the testing. They didn't see anything, and then got pregnant with this one and just wasn't sure, what was going to happen. And we got to the 20-week appointment. Everything was super healthy. It just taught me a lot through that pregnancy of just trying to be grounded. But every minute, as you know, is just holding your breath to the next appointment.
Yeah. It's like waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're like, what is going to happen?
And it's still like that
Oh,
even today.
I was
Like,
gonna say, you mentioned that, and I have not heard anybody say it the way you did it, but just like having like you said, like the losses we keep even when we have children, like then like the anxiety that comes with is very different, like being a mom after loss when
yeah.
you have children. And I think Amanda and I both experienced that.
go.
Yeah.
It definitely does not go away. Anytime like my son leaves, I'm like
Yes.
literally holding my
Or
breath.
you travel.
I get a phone call, something happened.
I went to Columbus literally for 24 hours, and I was like so nervous to leave. like,
Yeah.
oh
Just
God, what
worst case
happens?
scenario, one after the other. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so anyway, we luckily got pregnant with her, had a healthy pregnancy, and then when she was 10 months, we got pregnant again, and it was we were like not trying, but like whatever, like I was just trying to get my body back in motion because post partum and mid breastfeeding, like my hormones were all over the place. And I saw you guys post about Mira, like I used the Mira
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
huge. And we got pregnant with Carter. And so my husband and I were just like, we weren't sure, like, hey, we weren't sure like how it was going to go. So we were just like, okay, we'll see what happens and just take it day by day. And everything was going smooth. And we were so fortunate with that. And I think also, too, like, at that time, I was cutting out gluten and dairy before that pregnancy because I was just trying to get my hormones back in check. And I don't know. It's just interesting when you learn certain things to help your health. Like, I'm like, everybody's like, well, what fixed it? What helped you? And I'm like, I don't know. Like,
And
it
it's
could have been
frustrating.
that.
I know. I'm the same way. And as frustrating as that can be, I think it does give other people hope too, that like a lot of people that have had three, four, five, six, seven, eight losses, it's not like you don't have to do IVF to have success. You don't have to change anything. So I think that's really
Other
good
things.
side
But
too.
it's
Yeah.
hard because it's you got to try different things, but that also costs money out of your pocket because our healthcare doesn't provide that. And so yeah, so we had Carter, but right before I had Carter, my appendix erupted. But it was like a week of being so sick. And I'm like, what is happening right now? So like as you're going through your second child and trying to like just get this baby healthy, like all the things. And so it was just tough. It was just tough. And luckily he came healthy 3 weeks after. I'm super fortunate along this process. But the one thing that kept me driving to the book was like I always felt connected to women who've been through this, but then I felt like they had their baby and moved on. And it was a part of me was sad because we connected on this level. And I was so fortunate they shared their experience with me. And I understand sometimes people just want to move forward. But I told myself, like, I will be forever an advocate. So my daughter will never have to go through something like this, hopefully. I mean, can't talk about the times right now, what we're in from a government perspective, and let's pray that that's not the case. But I just was like, how can I help others along the way from our journey and continue to be an advocate? We decided we're not going to try for a third because mentally and physically, like, I just can't do it again. Like to go through another round and try to push, like, we would love a third, but I just like, we got two healthy kids right now and we're so blessed. And I just mentally, physically just can't go through it again. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much our story and with our two kids. But with the book, it was a moment with my postpartum doula who said, Jane, your story is so powerful. You've been so open and sharing. I really think you should write a book. And I'm like, I'm not a writer, whatever. I was going through like a weird time with like the startup company I was working for. So I was like not invigorated by that. And then I got let go from that job in 2023. And just something just kept coming up about the work I was doing, these companies I started connecting with in women's health. And it was like, okay, maybe there's something here. And when Jess and I met about the book, she was like, I just told her, I was like, our story is just one. Like, there's so many women who've been through different things that I think their stories would resonate with others. And that's how we created it, just saying, let's do an anthology, invite other authors to share their experiences. And so that it's a collection of stories. But for me, I always wanted to provide some light in it, because I had a lot of the books I'm sure you've read and seen, like it's either super religious, which is fine, it's just not me. Or just to your point, just didn't give the details of how they got through it and what kept them going. And so that was the hope of this never,
And I
being
just love that like everybody's journey is so different. And so for yours, and you could probably tell us more, there's like what, 8 to 10 stories. And so like if your personal story doesn't resonate with somebody, like maybe they didn't have recurrent loss or whatever, there's
right.
like another story, or maybe they didn't go to the beach for the 6 weeks. There's just
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
many
It
options in
shouldn't. Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they're like, okay, well, that didn't resonate, but let me go to the next chapter. And I love that. And I love how you titled them all too. So like people kind of have like an idea of what they're getting
That
into.
was the hope. Yeah.
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 How did you connect with the other authors, or did your publisher help with that a lot?
No, I mean, like I said, as you go through this journey and kind of what you guys felt, you kind of build this like community behind the scenes and these people. And so I knew a lot of people along the way that been through some hard things. So like, for example, Kate Rowe is one of my dear best friends. We met through Twitter back, God, over 10 years ago through Tone It Up. But she and I like went through hard experiences at the same time in different ways where she found out she had ovarian cancer twice. The second time when she found out, she had to hurry up and go through IVF to save her eggs before they took her second ovary out. And then she had to go through, after that surgery, she had embryos and then had to go through the transfer of all that because they still kept her uterus in. And she had a miscarriage. And then luckily, the second take, she was able to have her son. But her delivery process and then talking through the trauma of that, that was one thing. And then Amanda Phoebus, who's in the book, she was actually one of the first ladies who reached out to me as a friend. She was a client of mine at when I was teaching spin classes, and she was this fit mom, like had like you would just think she's perfect, she's so fit, and didn't realize like she had a very traumatic delivery. So Amanda was going through second infertility, went through rounds of IVF, and they basically got to a point and was like, because of your first delivery and the amount of scar tissue, you're unable to carry another pregnancy. And so I connected her with a friend who went through a surrogate who went through a similar situation. So I knew her story. And then trying to gather other stories, I must have spoken to over 40 women about who were interested. They were friends, they were people who were following. Jess shared on her platform. And so there was a couple authors that came through there. I posted on LinkedIn too, just because I was like, I feel like women's health is becoming a bigger deal on LinkedIn. So I was like, you never know. You
Yeah,
never know.
I don't want to stop you there, but I honestly, for me, like, because I am like in the corporate world and all this stuff, I just like, I appreciate you sharing so much of just kind of the other side, like your professional life while going through this, how they kind of like paralleled together. And I too, like, I posted on LinkedIn finally when I had my daughter after, gosh,
Mm,
years. I'm like, this is the best job I could have ever gotten, blah, blah, blah. And the amount of people on LinkedIn
crazy.
you're like, wait, what? And so, because it's been so taboo to number one, talk about just on social media, but then take it into a professional setting is even more taboo to talk about. You barely even can talk about being a mom. I really, every single, like every three paragraphs, I was like, oh my God, this is me. Oh my God, this
Yeah.
is me.
Yeah.
So I just love that.
Yeah, it's but it's sad too because I when you think about a lot corporate environments, you got to put a straight face on. You got to put yourself together that nobody knows what's going on. And so it's tricky that way, because you don't want anybody to feel like you're not doing your job and you're dropping the ball because of what happened and you don't want people to feel sorry for you. But that's another thing with the book that I realized too is like this book can be a resource for people in corporate. And that was like the hope too is to do corporate talks to maybe help educate managers that have, members who are going through it, especially a lot of companies now are paying for IVF cycles and partnering like, great, you're offering that service, but what are you doing from a environment and from a leadership
Bereavement
standpoint?
leave and yeah, like
Yeah.
if you come and say I had a miscarriage, like okay, well I still expect you to be like, oh, do you have surgery? No, okay. So I totally hear that and I can relate. And even like you just sharing like I'm we're just very similar in personalities where you were sharing you felt guilty for taking an hour away during the
Oh my
workday to
God.
go to therapy. Literally have those same thoughts of like even if it's from 12 to 1 and I'm like but I should be doing something different or I shouldn't be going to therapy. But like you said, you're like, but my baby just died. Like,
Yeah,
of
like I just went
course.
through this insane experience. And then like obviously in the book, like I talk about how there was so much more to unpack. Like Marianne, who's my therapist, another angel in my life, she was like, I think you should have came to therapy years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is probably explains why I burn myself out all the time and work is my coping mechanism. And here we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just love it. It's so great. And I haven't gotten to some of the other stories, but thank you so much. Are there any other, I think we did a really good job. I mean, obviously covering your personal story and the book, but do you want to touch on your podcast?
I
Like,
was
what do you
gonna say, how did the podcast come about? Where
My
did that
God.
come
Okay, so I'm in this season of like changes and it's so funny you brought this up because I was like meeting up with some friends. We do like a co-working situation where we're like, we'll talk about what we need help with, we'll help each other, but then we get the shit done. And so we were talking about the things I was working on. So the Radical Female came out like in 2020. Like I was just saying, like everybody goes through these radical transformations as women, and it's like the highs and the lows. But when you come from the lows, you change and you have this radical transformation of like what's next. And I felt that truly then. And so this, I would say, I was doing some consulting work, ended it in the end of December, and been working with a coach of like, okay, what's next? Like I have the book. There's some more things I want to do with the book, but I feel like given with the government situation we're in, I just was like waking up and feeling heavy and dark. And I was like, all right, we can't do this for the next 4 years because this is not healthy, Jane. But like something that came out of the book, where we had the book launch event, and this woman was like, Jamie, I don't even know you, but you're a lighthouse. You are a light for many who are going through a dark story. How the lighthouse came about because I live on Lighthouse Lane. Like the theme of a lighthouse, then I realized is something I've carried throughout my whole life, even as a kid, during the time when my mom was, handing me over to my aunt and what we went through. And so right now I'm going through like a podcast change. Also, too, life has just been, I don't know if you guys go through this with your podcast, just like with the kids, somebody's sick, the nanny's out, and it's snowing, there's a holiday. And I'm just like, I feel like this season I have not been able to like catch my breath, but at the same time I'm making changes. So I want to just be thoughtful in this creative process and not just rush it because I feel like everything else I do is rushed because you're just trying to get the thing done. Um, anyway, so yeah, I'm revamping the podcast to the lighthouse theme and this theory of about being a lighthouse for others and also doing with a Substack, and just really helping women and just people in general, like these bright moments, these people that we have in our life that are the lighthouse. And anything that's like big life changes to like the everyday small waves that come through and how we can just take those step by step things and bright lights to help carry us. Because when I think about, especially in the fertility journey and what I went through, writing every day was something to like meditate, get grounded. What is the bright light just for today? Because that's going to help me get to the next day. And so that's really what I'm working on. And then plus with the losses we keep, planning to do a journal for the 1 year anniversary to complement with the book. So when you're reading through the stories, you're in the journey. Something that helped me was writing and reading, and so I'm hoping to curate that for people who are in the journey.
I love that so much. And I look forward to even just listening to the podcast. I think Kat and I have like also talked about something like similar of, there's so many women that are quote unquote on the other side of infertility and they do have kids, but I mean, hello, your book, like you keep all of this. And so it's still there, but you're in the day-to-day of motherhood.
Yeah,
And like even just sharing those moments too, I think are so important. And I think now we like are nervous to talk about it because so many people are still like struggling but so we want to like honor that, but it is our everyday life. And so being able to share those moments that people can also resonate with, I think is so important. So I'm so excited to listen and kind of hear all that. And just even the journal. I feel like that's so smart because they can go through it and then they're like, oh wait, this is similar to my story. Like, let me write this out. And it's so therapeutic.
it
So
is.
that is
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're having a tough day, there's a moment, or maybe like for me, I had these like signs, like theirs were always a sign for me, and they would just show up before like having our children. And then I would just be like, I saw a feather today. I don't know, it's my mom or it's my spirit baby or whatever. Just to be like, that was a bright moment of my day, and to remind yourself. And even like mantras, we were talking about the journey to the heart. It's kind of like a meditation book for each day, and these mantras and things that just really resonated with me. So I'm hoping that I can give that to others who may not have those resources. And so this could be like a nice complement to that.
I love it. Well, that is incredible. We appreciate you coming on and sharing
Oh,
all.
I'm sorry for the chaos, obviously.
No, it's totally fine. We don't care
It's
at all.
Saturday morning. My mother-in-law came over to help me, and
I
she's
love it.
like so lucky to have her. And yeah, Adley escaped from Mimi and wants to do things up here. So I appreciate your patience
Oh,
with the chaos, with the dog barking and everything. But this
it's
is
fine. Yep. No, I love it. And for our listeners, what is the best way for people to reach out to you, how to find you on Instagram, or can you share your?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Jami Crist. And then we have The Losses We Keep on Instagram as well. You can find the book on Amazon. You just type in The Losses We Keep, and we would really appreciate if you can drive it to there. Um, Also, we have it on the Kindle version. Audiobook is coming in the next few weeks. It's been quite a journey for audiobook, and I have a high respect for people who do audiobooks all the time because it is not easy. But that's coming out soon. I know a lot of folks like to listen on the go, and you can read more about The Losses We Keep at jamicrist.com. And thank you for you ladies for creating this platform and just being a resource, and just you're just so authentic and real too. And I just, you see that through your content, through this podcast and what you're building. So thank you for both of you reconnecting and sharing everything on here. And I hope we can stay in touch and do more together in the future.
Thank you.